Jimi Hendrix. September 18, 1970. Notting Hill, London, England. The highest-paid performer in rock and roll, 27 years old, was asleep in a basement flat that belonged to somebody else, and the sleeping tablets on the nightstand were not his. They were prescribed to Monica Danman, the woman he was staying with. The label said half a tablet. He had taken 9. There had been red wine that night as well. A manager, a booking agent, and a record label were waiting on him. So was his own studio in New York, opened 3 weeks earlier. At around 11 in the morning, Danman went out for cigarettes. When she came back, he was breathing and would not wake up. She did not call for an ambulance straight away. What she did in the time that followed has never been established. An ambulance was called at 18 minutes past 11. By the time the crew arrived, she was gone. They found the front door standing open. Paramedic Reg Jones described what was on the bed. Vomit covered the pillow, black and brown, and the airway underneath it was completely blocked. At the hospital, the doctor on duty, John Bannister, said the amount of wine coming out of him was extraordinary. His lungs and stomach were full of it. The coroner recorded inhalation of vomit due to barbiturate intoxication. Then he recorded an open verdict, because not one person could tell him what had happened in that room. A whole payroll existed to know where Hendrix was at every hour of the day. On the morning he stopped breathing, the room was empty, and the door stood open. Ronnie Van Zant. October 20th, 1977. Gillsburg, Mississippi. The singer of Lynyrd Skynyrd was asleep on the floor of a chartered plane with a pillow under his head, and another band's crew had refused to fly in it. The plane was 30 years old. Aerosmith's crew had turned it down after watching the 2 pilots pass a bottle of Jack Daniels during a walk-around. Days earlier, the band's keyboard player had seen flame come out of the right engine in mid-air. The band said so out loud. They had played Greenville, South Carolina the night before, and the office had another show booked in Baton Rouge. Backing singer Cassie Gaines was frightened enough of the plane that she had been riding in the equipment truck instead. That afternoon, Van Zant talked her back on board. At 6:42 in the evening, the captain radioed Houston. He said they were low on fuel and just about out of it, and asked for a heading to Macomb, post-haste. 3 minutes later, he reported the fuel was gone. That was the last transmission. The plane came down into Mississippi pine forest. The trunks were 3 feet thick. Drummer Artemis Pyle said they went from 200 miles an hour to a dead stop in about 10 seconds, and the trees tore the aircraft completely apart. Billy Powell was pulled out of the swamp with his nose almost sliced off his face. Guitarist Gary Rossington had broken both arms, both wrists, both legs, both ankles, and his pelvis. Van Zant was killed instantly by a massive head injury. There was not another scratch on him. 1 bruise, the size of a quarter, at the temple. 6 people died in the trees, and Cassie Gaines was one of them. Investigators found the crew had run the tanks dry. The cheap plane was the only reason the schedule worked. Janis Joplin. On October 4, 1970. Hollywood, California. The woman who had gone on at Monterey and at Woodstock, 27 years old, let herself into room 105 of the Landmark Motor Hotel. The heroin in her bag had come from a dealer, and nobody that weekend knew what he was selling. Other customers of the same dealer overdosed that weekend. The batch was far stronger than anything she had used before. Her road manager worked that out afterwards. She had 1 vocal left to record. There was a session booked at Sunset Sound that afternoon, a producer waiting, a band on salary. She went down to the lobby, bought cigarettes, and carried the change back upstairs. Then she injected, alone, and stood up to walk. She did not come to the session. Her producer, Paul Rothschild, was the one who noticed she was missing, and he called the road manager. John Byrne Cook found her at 7:30 that evening, wedged face down between the bed and the nightstand. Her nose was broken from the fall. Her lip had split, and there was blood across her mouth when they turned her over. One hand still held a cigarette. The other was closed around $4.50 in change. The coroner, Thomas Noguchi, counted fresh needle marks on the left arm and ruled it an accidental overdose. He also noted that the room was oddly clean. Somebody had already been in and taken the drug kit away to protect her name. The album was finished without her and went to #1 in January. Nobody reached Janis Joplin for most of a day. Somebody reached her room in time to clean it. Bobby Ramirez. July 23, 1972. Rush Street, Chicago, Illinois. The drummer out of Edgar Winter's White Trash had come off stage that night opening for Uriah Heep. He was standing at a urinal in a nightclub, and the man beside him was looking at his hair. The man told him that with hair like that, he belonged in the ladies' room. Ramirez answered him. The man hit him in the face, bloodied his nose, and walked out. He had not grown the hair for himself. Off the stage, it stayed on him. Ramirez cleaned himself up and went back to the table. He wanted the police called, and the club manager would not do it. The man who had hit him did not go home either. He waited outside, and he had friends with him. Sometime after midnight, Ramirez left the club with his singer, Jerry LaCroix, and the band's manager. He turned the corner. They jumped him there. LaCroix said they kicked Ramirez in the head, over and over, with pointed steel-toe shoes. They beat LaCroix down as well when he tried to help. When he came round and sat up, he saw Ramirez on the ground with his face a pulpy mess, held in the arms of the band's manager. Ramirez was pronounced dead in the early hours of July 24th. He was 23 years old. His singer said the spirit of the band died with him. No arrest was ever reported. The business had sold that look for 10 years and sent him out on the road wearing it. Billboard reported the death in a paragraph, and the trade already had a name for the men who did it: anti-long hairs. Keith Moon. September 7th, 1978. Mayfair, London, England. The drummer of The Who came home in the early hours from a film premiere party, and the bottle of 100 tablets by the bed was his to count out himself. The drug was clomethazole. Doctors give it to alcoholics coming off drink inside a clinic where somebody else counts out the doses. Moon was doing it at home. His physician, Jeffrey Diamond, did not know how Moon lived. He had written the prescription and told him to take one when he wanted a drink. 3 a day, maximum. Then he handed the bottle to the patient. The flat was not Moon's either. A friend in the business lent it out. 4 years earlier, the singer Cass Elliot had been found dead in that room. Moon was asleep in it. He swallowed a handful at about 4 in the morning. He woke around 7:30, argued with his fiancée, the Swedish model Annette Walter Lax, and swallowed more before going back to sleep. Nobody counted them. Walter Lax checked on him that afternoon and found him dead, face down on the bed. The post-mortem did the counting. He had swallowed 32 tablets, and 26 of them were still sitting in his stomach, undissolved. The certificate recorded an overdose of clomethazole, self-administered, no evidence of intention. Open verdict. Keith Moon was 32 years old, and the substance that killed him was the one written out to stop the drinking from killing him first. Graham Parsons. September 19th, 1973. Joshua Tree, California. The man who taught the Rolling Stones to play country music was in room 8 of a desert motel, and the woman sitting on the bed with him was holding a syringe of liquid morphine. He had come out to the desert to get clean. That was the version everybody had been given. He had been in the room 2 days and he was buying. He stopped breathing that night. 2 friends put him in a cold shower to bring him round. It did not work. An ambulance took him to the hospital in Yucca Valley, where he was pronounced dead at 15 minutes past midnight. The coroner's finding was multiple drug use. He was 26. Then the machine took over the body. His stepfather claimed it and booked it onto a flight to Louisiana, where a funeral would help settle the estate. Parsons had told his road manager, Phil Kaufman, that he wanted to burn in the desert instead. So Kaufman and a friend of his, Michael Martin, borrowed a hearse with no plates and broken windows and drove to Los Angeles International Airport. They reached the loading dock just as a flatbed truck brought the casket out to it. Kaufman told the airline the family had changed its plans. A police officer standing at the dock helped them lift it into the hearse. Stealing a corpse was not a crime in California. Stealing the casket was, and that is what they were charged with. They drove it out to Cap Rock, opened the lid, and poured 5 gallons of gasoline over him. Kaufman threw in a match, and they left it burning. On the morning of September 21st, tourists walking out to the rocks found a coffin still smoldering, with a charred body inside it. What was left of him was recovered and sent back to his family. Parsons had wanted the desert. His stepfather had wanted Louisiana. He was burned in one and buried in the other.